This is Alex Mercer, broadcasting live through the stillness of the night. And I need to share something with you. Something that began quietly, almost too quietly, in a place where silence is measured in light years. At the Deep Sky Array, a facility built far from cities, far from power lines, far from anything that could disturb the delicate ears of the universe, a small team of astronomers was working the graveyard shift. Most of them were halfway through cold coffee, running data logs, expecting nothing more exciting than the usual hiss of background radiation. But at exactly 2:14 a.m., one of their monitors flickered, just for a moment, and a young researcher leaned in, frowning at what he thought was nothing more than a glitch. The screen showed a brief spike, a burst of radio energy sharp enough to catch his attention, but small enough to dismiss. He almost laughed, assuming the old equipment was acting up again. But then it happened a second time, and a third. At first they tried to rationalize it. Cosmic rays, solar interference, a passing satellite bouncing noise off the ionosphere. But the more they studied it, the more impossible those explanations became. The bursts were too consistent, too clean, each one spaced with mathematical precision. The junior researcher, suddenly wide awake, began recording the data, and as he watched the numbers stabilize into a pattern far too deliberate to be natural, he called the rest of the team over. They crowded around the screen, staring at a rhythm, pulsing through the static, steady, patient, almost organic. One of them described it as a heartbeat, repeating at intervals so perfect they felt rehearsed. Moments like this change people. One of the senior scientists, a man who has spent 4 decades staring into a universe that has never spoken back, sank slowly into his chair as the realization settled in. This wasn't noise. This wasn't an accident. This was something intentional, something shaped, something sent. His voice, I'm told, shook as he whispered the words none of them ever expected to say outside of science fiction. Someone is calling. You have to understand the weight of that moment. Humans have listened to the cosmos for a century, hoping for one sign, one anomaly that could hint at intelligence beyond our world. And most nights, the universe gives us nothing but silence. But tonight, it answered. It answered with a pulse so precise that even the skeptics in that room felt their certainty crack. They ran checks, diagnostics, system resets, everything they could do to prove themselves wrong. But the pattern kept returning, repeating exactly, like a message waiting for human comprehension. As I speak to you now, the entire facility is locked into analysis mode. Teams who had been asleep an hour ago are now rushing in from their dormitories. No one is thinking about rest. No one is thinking about going home. They're replaying the bursts over and over, listening to the rhythm of something that came from a place they cannot name yet. Something that shouldn't exist, and yet undeniably does. And here I am telling you about it, because the sky is no longer silent, and the world deserves to know when the universe chooses to speak. This is Alex Mercer, and whatever sent those signals, it's reached out across the dark, and tonight, for the first time, someone out there may have tapped their finger on the void and announced themselves. This is Alex Mercer, returning to you with developments that are growing stranger by the hour. After the initial bursts were detected at the Deep Sky Array, the research team immediately began dissecting the data, pulling apart the layers of noise like archaeologists brushing sand from ancient stone. What they found wasn't just repetition, it was structure. Beneath the static, underneath the chaotic hiss of cosmic background radiation. There was a rhythm so precise, so intentional, that it could only be described as a signature, a cosmic fingerprint left by something that knew exactly what it was doing. Imagine tuning a radio and suddenly finding your name woven faintly into the static. That same eerie familiarity filled the lab as the researchers realized the pattern wasn't random at all. It carried a sense of design, of purpose, as if whoever crafted it understood that humans would eventually find it, study it, and recognize it for what it was. The team huddled over the data streams, watching as one clear frequency repeated with almost ceremonial discipline. It was too clean, too deliberate to be a naturally occurring phenomenon. No star, no pulsar, no cosmic event produces a signature this carefully arranged. One of the analysts said it felt like someone had carved a symbol into the radio waves themselves, a mark, a message, a declaration of identity. And what unsettled them most wasn't the alien nature of the pattern, but the strange sense of familiarity it carried. Not familiar as in human, but familiar as in intentionally simplified, almost as if the sender had shaped it in a way that beings like us could understand. The realization hung in the air like a cold mist. The signal wasn't just heard, it was crafted. A senior member of the staff, a man who has spent over 40 years listening to an unresponsive universe, sat quietly through the analysis. He had seen thousands of false alarms, hundreds of equipment malfunctions, countless blips that turned into nothing. He was known for his skepticism, for his insistence that the universe was vast, indifferent, and empty. But tonight, as he studied the repeating pattern on the monitor, his hands began to tremble. He leaned back in his chair, the glow of the screen painting lines of fear and wonder across his face. In a voice barely above a whisper, he said, "It's intentional. It's meant for us." Coming from a man who had sworn off belief in cosmic communication, the statement left the room in stunned silence. For the first time, everyone in that room felt the enormous weight of what they were witnessing. The universe, which had always felt impossibly large and impossibly quiet, suddenly felt alive, aware, even watchful. The room, filled with buzzing machines and soft electric hums, felt smaller, as if the walls were drawing in around them under the realization that humanity might not be alone after all. Conversations dropped to hushed tones. The researchers began pacing in slow circles, pulled between awe and dread, exhilaration and disbelief. The idea that someone, somewhere across a gulf of unimaginable distance, had crafted a signal specifically shaped for human comprehension carried a kind of beauty, but also an unsettling, indescribable intimacy. And so I speak to you now with the same mix of emotions that has gripped that desert laboratory. The signal has a fingerprint, an identity, and it is not the product of chance. This is Alex Mercer, and as the night stretches on, we are left to grapple with the possibility that something out there knows we're listening. This is Alex Mercer, returning with yet another development from the Deep Sky Array, where scientists and specialists are now fully engaged in an intellectual battle with the mysterious signal pulsing through the void. After confirming that the bursts carried a deliberate fingerprint, the team did what any of us would have done. They tried to understand it. They brought in linguists, mathematicians, computational theorists, and every artificial intelligence model capable of handling complex pattern recognition. They fed the signal into supercomputers that can normally unravel centuries-old ciphers in seconds. They projected the data into spectral graphs, frequency charts, symbolic representations, anything that could offer a foothold into meaning. And for a moment, it seemed like progress was finally within reach. Early translations hinted at structure, repeating values, perhaps even mathematical sequencing. The linguists drafted symbols. The mathematicians mapped prime number patterns. But then, right when they believed they'd cracked the first layer of the message, the pulse changed. Not just once, not subtly. It shifted in a way that felt almost intentional, like someone adjusting their tone in mid-conversation, watching to see how the listener reacts. Every time the researchers gained ground, the pattern evolved, sliding into a different cadence, breaking apart familiar rhythms, recombining into new forms that forced the decoding teams to start again from scratch. It was as if the message was alive, dynamic, responsive. The word playful has come up several times in the internal reports, a strange and unsettling term for a signal traveling across the cosmic dark. But that is the truth of it. The signal behaves as though it is watching them back, as though it is learning from their attempts to decode it, and reshaping itself accordingly. Tension in the lab has shifted from excitement to something more complicated. Some researchers have grown visibly frustrated, years of study telling them that information should not behave this way, that messages do not rewrite themselves in real time. They insist that science should follow predictable steps, that meaning should eventually emerge through hard work and logic. Yet this signal refuses to sit still long enough to be understood. Others, however, have fallen into a kind of obsession. They hover over their screens without eating or sleeping, captivated by the living quality of the data. One linguist described it as trying to hold a conversation with a dream. You almost grasp the meaning, only for it to blur into something new the moment you touch it. Perhaps the most chilling insight came from a cryptographer who left a private voice log earlier tonight, a recording meant for internal documentation. His voice was tired, stretched thin by hours of chasing patterns that dissolved in front of him. In the log, he confessed something that has now circulated through the team like an unspoken fear. It feels like it's learning from us, like it's waiting for us to understand. Those words have lingered with me all evening, waiting for us to understand. That suggests intent, patience, perhaps even intelligence on the other end of the line. And if that is true, then decoding this signal is no longer about mathematics or linguistics. It becomes something far more profound: communication. As I speak, the supercomputers continue to run. New models are being trained, new hypotheses drafted, yet the signal remains just beyond comprehension, shifting like a shadow at the edge of vision. Whatever is sending this message is not only aware of our attempts, it may be participating in them. This is Alex Mercer, and the deeper we go into this mystery, the more it feels like we are not just studying the signal, but engaging with it. This is Alex Mercer, and the story unfolding tonight has taken a strange and sobering turn. Only a short while ago, the world's governments issued a joint public announcement, one that was delivered not with urgency or alarm, but with a kind of clinical calm that almost felt rehearsed. The statement was brief, polished to the point of sterility. Minor signal interference may affect civilian frequencies. Please do not be alarmed. No explanation, no details. Just a carefully measured line meant to steady the public while revealing nothing. But the problem with such carefully constructed reassurances is that people can feel when something is being hidden from them. You don't need to be a scientist or a government official to know when a truth is being tucked behind a closed door. And it didn't take long for the world to discover for itself that this was far more than minor interference. All across the country, and indeed across the globe, ordinary citizens began noticing strange distortions in the devices they use every day. Radios crackled not with the usual static, but with synthetic tones, short bursts of sound that rose and fell with unnatural regularity. In cars, the stereo systems picked up faint whispers threaded through the music, like distant voices speaking in a language that dissolved as soon as one tried to focus on it. Old televisions, the kind that rely on analog signals, flickered with a rhythmic pulse, as if the screen itself were breathing. Even modern digital systems designed to filter out noise were unable to ignore the strange frequencies creeping into their signals. Parents reported something even more unsettling. Children claiming they could hear music within the static. Not noise, not distortion. Music. Soft melodic patterns woven into the interference, recognizable only to ears unburdened by expectation. One mother told a local station that her daughter had sat quietly beside the radio for nearly half an hour, smiling faintly as though listening to a lullaby that adults could no longer perceive. Stories like this spread quickly, not through official channels, but through social media, whispered conversations, and anxious late-night phone calls between friends who needed reassurance that they weren't imagining things. But the truth was too widespread to ignore. The world, whether the governments will admit it or not, has collectively held its breath. Something beyond our understanding, something impossibly distant yet suddenly intimate, has found a way to thread its voice through our machines. We built these devices to speak to each other, to broadcast music and news and laughter across the airwaves. But tonight, those same channels have become conduits for something else entirely. Something that has chosen to speak through our tools rather than create its own. That choice alone raises questions that none of us are prepared to answer. And so I, like all of you, sit here struggling to comprehend the enormity of what's happening. The signal that began as a distant anomaly has now seeped into the fabric of everyday life. It has crossed a boundary, stepped from the realm of scientific curiosity into the living rooms, cars, and pockets of ordinary people. Something far away, something that should have remained a distant whisper in the black void, has learned to speak through our machines, to reach us in ways that feel deliberate, intimate, and impossibly close. This is Alex Mercer, and tonight, the world listens. Not because we want to, but because something out there has decided it's time for us to hear. This is Alex Mercer again, and whatever illusion of control we thought we had over the situation has begun to slip through our fingers. The signal that started as a distant curiosity has now bled into the very infrastructure of our daily lives. Reports from across the nation, and from other countries as well, describe an escalating wave of communication disruptions. At first, people noticed small changes, a brief stutter in a phone call, a moment of distortion in a radio broadcast. Harmless, easily ignored. But as the hours have passed, the anomalies have grown bolder, stranger, harder to dismiss as coincidence. Phones now echo with a strange mechanical breath, a faint rhythmic pulse that overlays the voices of loved ones. Callers describe hearing their own words repeated back to them, not with the delay of low-quality reception, but with an eerie, artificial inflection, as if something is mimicking human speech in real time, practicing the shape of our language with imperfect precision. News broadcasts, both digital and analog, have begun to warp mid-sentence into tones that don't belong to any human voice or any known instrument. Perfectly structured words crumble into unfamiliar harmonics, and anchors, startled and confused, lose their place as entire segments dissolve into alien soundscapes. The most unsettling reports come from emergency frequencies. Trained dispatchers, people who have spent careers parsing life and death information from crackling static, are hearing something they cannot explain. A sound carried beneath the interference, resembling a voice but not formed by any mouth we know. Not words, not language. Something that wants to be language but hasn't quite become it. A kind of vocal shadow, a presence struggling to articulate itself through equipment designed only for human communication. One dispatcher told a colleague that the sound felt like someone leaning close to whisper into the receiver, someone who didn't fully understand how whispering works. The unease spreading across the population isn't born from panic or rumor. It comes from experience. People are hearing this. People are feeling it. It's no longer limited to high-tech observatories or scientific circles. The signal has seeped into the everyday world, into our cars, our phones, our televisions, our emergency lines. It no longer feels like humanity is listening to a distant message, faint and far away. It feels like something on the other side of that message is reaching through, searching for a foothold, testing the boundaries of our technology, trying to find a way in. And as I speak here tonight, I can feel that truth weighing on me as well. This isn't passive reception anymore. This isn't just data traveling across space until it collides with our antennas. Something is happening. Something active, deliberate, and uncomfortably close. The boundary between our world and whatever is sending that signal is thinning, as though the vast distance that once protected us is collapsing with every passing moment. The message is no longer simply being heard. It is crossing over. This is Alex Mercer, and the line between our voice and theirs is becoming harder to distinguish. The night grows stranger by the minute. This is Alex Mercer, and I wish I could tell you that the situation was stabilizing, that the signal was just an anomaly, a stray whisper from somewhere harmless and far away. But the updates coming in tonight are not comforting. In fact, they mark a turning point so profound that even the most seasoned astronomers are struggling to accept what they're seeing. Remember that distant point in space where the signal originated? That fixed position they believed was millions of miles beyond anything that could interact with us? It is no longer fixed. It is no longer distant. It is moving, accelerating, in fact, and it is headed directly toward our solar system. The team at the Deep Sky Array wasn't prepared for this. None of us were. For days, they charted the location of the anomaly as if it were a stationary beacon, an address stamped into the sky. But late this afternoon, while reviewing updated telemetry, an analyst noticed a fractional shift in the coordinates. At first, he assumed it was an error. He recalibrated, rechecked, ran simulations. But the shift remained. And then, over the next several hours, that error grew into undeniable motion. The source of the signal wasn't drifting. It wasn't wobbling due to gravitational influence. It was accelerating with a level of precision no natural object could achieve. No comet, no asteroid, no known form of cosmic phenomenon can alter its velocity with such smooth, deliberate control. Astronomers around the world have confirmed what the first team feared to say aloud. The object, or whatever is producing the signal, is closing the distance between itself and Earth. Not slowly, not casually. It is coming fast, with a trajectory so steady and so direct that it feels like intention carved into motion. There is no propulsion system known to humanity capable of generating such speed, especially across interstellar space. No rocket, no ion drive. Nothing we've ever imagined could produce acceleration without exhaust, without thermal signatures, without any detectable force. And yet, this thing is doing exactly that. When the realization sank in, an eerie silence settled across every scientific channel. These are people who debate constantly, who question everything, who challenge each other's findings as instinctively as they breathe. But tonight, none of them have much to say. How do you argue with a trajectory that spells out your planet's coordinates? How do you debate data that shows something, someone, crossing the gulf of space with purpose? Governments haven't issued statements yet. Perhaps they don't know what to say. Perhaps they know exactly what this means and are desperately trying to decide how much of it the public is ready to hear. But here, on this broadcast, I will tell you the truth plainly. Something has set its course for Earth. Something intelligent enough to craft a fingerprinted message. Something aware enough to modulate our communications. Something confident enough to move through the cosmos with a precision that defies everything we know about physics. And whatever it is, it's coming fast. This is Alex Mercer. Tonight, the void is not still, and the thing that once whispered to us from the darkness is no longer content to stay there. This is Alex Mercer, returning with an update that has shaken the decoding labs to their core. For weeks now, the brightest minds in linguistics, cryptography, and astrophysics have been peeling back the layers of the interstellar signal like archaeologists brushing dust from an ancient artifact. They believed the message was complex, yes, but singular. One voice, one transmission, one intention. But late last night, during a particularly exhaustive decoding session, something astonishing surfaced. A second layer hidden beneath the primary signal. And unlike the structured rhythmic pattern we've grown familiar with, this buried layer is different, sharp, jagged, uneven. It pulses like a heartbeat trapped inside a panic attack. The discovery was accidental. A team at the Deep Sky Array, attempting to filter background noise with a new separation algorithm, suddenly found the waveform splitting cleanly into two distinct patterns. The first, the one we've been studying, held its usual intentional rhythm. But the second hit the lab like a cold wind. It thrashes and stutters in a way no greeting would. No announcement. No attempt at communication with a species like ours. It feels more like the emotional signature of something terrified, something running out of time. When the lead analyst isolated the layer and replayed it through a visualizer, the shape of the waveform made him step back from the screen as though it had physically reached for him. He later said, it reminded him of the way an animal screams when cornered. And here's the most unsettling part. This hidden layer is not directed at humanity. At least, that's what the decoding teams believe. The cadence, the structure, the mathematical anchors, they don't align with anything meant for comprehension by minds like ours. It's as if we've accidentally intercepted a private message, a transmission intended for someone, or something, else out there in the dark. Something the broadcaster of this signal fears. Something that might already be on the move. Something that could be following the path of the original message like a bloodhound tracing a scent through the void. One of the researchers, exhausted and visibly shaken, wrote a sealed brief to world leaders early this morning. I don't have access to the full document. None of us do. But leaks from within the lab paint a grim picture. The final line of his note is what has everyone in the scientific community rattled, pacing their hallways, staring at screens as if waiting for them to speak. The line reads, "This isn't a greeting. This is a distress signal or a warning. If that is true, and the evidence seems to say it is, then everything we assumed about the approaching object must be reconsidered, because maybe it wasn't the one sending the message. Maybe it was the one the message was meant to avoid. This is Alex Mercer, signing off for now. But the sky is starting to feel crowded, and for the first time since this began, I think we may not be the only ones listening. This is Alex Mercer, and the developments over the past hours have escalated beyond the realm of theory into something far more tangible and far more alarming. Telescopes across the world have begun reporting anomalies, small dark objects moving through the solar system, approaching Earth from directions that defy conventional celestial mechanics. They are not comets. They are not asteroids. They do not reflect sunlight. They appear almost invisible against the black canvas of space, detectable only by the subtle distortions they leave against known stellar backgrounds. Cold as the void itself, these objects slip between planets with a grace that seems deliberate, almost predatory, as if the universe itself is holding its breath while something unseen hunts through it. Scientists are describing their movement in terms that unsettle even the most grounded among them. They do not drift. They do not tumble. They glide with precision, weaving trajectories that make satellites seem chaotic in comparison. Instruments designed to measure propulsion fail to detect any exhaust, any signature of mechanical effort. Some researchers whisper that these are not machines at all. Some refuse to whisper for fear of sounding absurd. Yet the motions, the speed, the intelligence implied by their flight patterns, there is no natural explanation. They are deliberate. They are purposeful. They are here. Outside the laboratories, the public is reacting in real time. Rumors flood social media, news networks, and online forums. Speculation runs wild. Reconnaissance drones, living organisms from beyond the stars, automated scouts mapping our defenses before a larger arrival. Citizens stare at the sky with unease, scanning the heavens with binoculars, cameras, even homemade telescopes, searching for shapes that they cannot hope to see. Fear grows not from what is known, but from what cannot be known. Humanity has never faced an unknown like this, something that approaches silently, without sound, without light, without announcement. And yet, in all of this, the most chilling realization is that no explanation, no theory, no rumor brings comfort. The truth of these objects is inaccessible. We cannot touch them. We cannot communicate with them. They simply exist, moving steadily toward Earth with an intent we can only guess at. And perhaps that is the most terrifying part. The unknown is always larger than the known, more overwhelming than the answer. For the first time, the world feels small, fragile, and watched by entities we cannot comprehend. This is Alex Mercer, reporting to you from the edge of a world suddenly rendered vulnerable, where the silence of space has been pierced not by sound, but by the arrival of something that does not belong. And yet, it is undeniably here. This is Alex Mercer, and tonight, the world finds itself caught between messages that contradict, confuse, and unsettle in equal measure. In the hours since the first anomalous objects and signals were confirmed, governments across the globe have been scrambling to respond, but their statements are far from unified. Some nations maintain a tone of deliberate calm, insisting that the strange phenomena detected in our skies are nothing more than natural occurrences, cosmic coincidences, or minor anomalies in satellite tracking. They urge citizens to carry on as usual, framing the reports as harmless, even mundane, the kind of events astronomers occasionally document, but the general public rarely notices. Their language is measured, their reassurances carefully polished, but the words ring hollow to many, because what the public experiences with their own senses tells a very different story. Meanwhile, other governments are taking a far more militarized approach, preparing defenses, mobilizing forces, and conducting operations they describe as satellite recovery exercises or routine maneuvers. Large-scale air and naval patrols have been observed repositioning, and classified communications indicate readiness protocols that go far beyond anything publicly disclosed. To ordinary citizens, these actions speak volumes, raising questions that official statements deliberately avoid answering. And with conflicting explanations streaming simultaneously from different sources, the public has begun to grow distrustful. People no longer know which authority to believe. Conspiracy theories, once the playground of fringe commentators, have surged into mainstream conversation. Social media and news forums are flooded with speculation, ranging from secretive government cover-ups to the idea that the approaching objects are scouting for a more ominous arrival. Rational analysis competes with fear and rumor, but the line between them is thinning by the hour. The result is a simmering global panic, subtle yet undeniable. It is not a hysteria that forces people into the streets, but a quieter, deeper tension, a collective anxiety threading through cities and towns worldwide. Citizens check their devices compulsively, listen for unexplained sounds on the radio, and look skyward more often than before, wondering if the next anomaly will be visible to the naked eye. Everyday routines are undercut by the sense that something is very wrong, something that no official statement can fully explain or contain. The world has been thrust into a state of uncertainty so complete that the familiar pillars of trust, governments, scientific authorities, media outlets, now wobble, leaving only the raw unease of individuals confronting an unknown far greater than themselves. And so, as I report tonight, the landscape of human perception has shifted. We are watching not only the skies, but the fracturing of confidence on a planetary scale. Every statement, every reassurance, every exercise meant to calm the public, instead magnifies the tension. The uncertainty lingers, pressing in, reminding humanity that in the face of something truly alien, not even authority can provide certainty. This is Alex Mercer, reporting on a world poised on the edge of comprehension, trying to make sense of signals, shadows, and messages that seem determined to test our very perception of reality. This is Alex Mercer, and tonight the airwaves, once our most trusted channels for information, have become battlegrounds of belief, fear, and desperation. Over the past several hours, more and more emergency frequencies have been compromised by religious extremist groups and doomsday cults, each fighting to seize control of the narrative surrounding the incoming anomalies. Instead of official alerts or scientific updates, listeners are assaulted by frantic voices declaring that the end has arrived, that the stars are opening like wounds, and that the descent of these unknown objects marks the collapse of everything we know. They hijack emergency lines with startling ease, their cries spilling into police radios, hospital networks, Coast Guard communications, and even civilian broadcasts. What should be channels of clarity and coordination have become echo chambers of panic. Some cult leaders preach with a conviction so fierce it feels like an electrical current roaring through the wires. Their voices tremble with equal parts terror and triumph as they declare that humanity has angered something divine. that the invaders are not alien machines, but celestial judges sent to cleanse a world that has lost its way. "The sky is tearing open!" one intercepted preacher screamed, his voice shaking with manic certainty. "Prepare for judgment! Prepare your souls!" Others claim salvation is at hand, promising deliverance only to those who follow their teachings, donate their savings, abandon their families, or gather in hidden sanctuaries to await the coming of a new cosmic order. Each message, no matter how irrational or extreme, spreads faster than any official correction can hope to contain. The emotional contagion is powerful. Fear travels faster than truth ever could. For many, the scientific explanations and government reassurances, already fraying from contradictions, can't compete with the primal pull of prophecy. People are frightened, searching for meaning, for patterns, for a sense of control in a moment when the universe feels overwhelmingly vast and implacable. And when someone speaks with absolute certainty, even if that certainty is madness, it becomes tempting to listen. Families argue behind locked doors, communities splinter. Some individuals cling to faith for comfort, while others plunge into fanaticism, convinced that these anomalies are signs long foretold. Humanity is no longer reacting to the unknown in unity. It is fracturing under its weight. What's happening now is more than a spiritual panic. It is a psychological rupture spreading across continents. The noise on the airwaves reflects the noise in our minds, a world struggling to reconcile ancient fears with modern confusion, the tangible presence of something alien with the intangible terror it awakens in us. The invasion has not begun, not in any physical sense, yet already the human psyche is under siege. We are being tested not only by what approaches from the sky, but by the shadows rising within us, our doubts, our beliefs, our need for answers that no one can yet provide. This is Alex Mercer, witnessing a planet whose unity is buckling beneath the pressure of cosmic uncertainty. And as the signals grow louder and the objects draw nearer, it becomes painfully clear that humanity is battling on two fronts, one in the heavens and one in the human heart. This is Alex Mercer, and tonight, humanity took its first deliberate step into what may be the most consequential communication in our species' history. After days of observing, analyzing, and attempting to interpret the enigmatic signals and the steadily approaching objects, the decision was made. Earth would respond. A planetary radar, the most powerful humanity has ever built, was calibrated to emit a structured, intentional transmission, carefully crafted not to provoke, but to announce our presence, to convey curiosity, intelligence, and perhaps a willingness to communicate. Engineers, scientists, and government officials held their collective breath as the broadcast lifted from our planet and raced into the void, an audible heartbeat of our existence aimed at something beyond comprehension. For one silent, anxious minute, the world waited. Monitors flickered, data streams updated, computers hummed, and nothing happened. The sky, already tense with anticipation, remained indifferent. Across the control rooms, scientists leaned closer to screens, half expecting the impossible. And then slowly, an eerie development. The approaching objects, the dark, silent entities that had defied all natural explanation, ceased movement entirely. They did not change course. They did not accelerate. They hovered in perfect stillness, as if suspended by some invisible tether. For the first time, humanity had drawn a direct reaction, and it was not aggression nor greeting. It was silence, loaded, deliberate, and unsettling. No signal returned, no response, no acknowledgement, no pattern to interpret. The objects were there, and yet they were not. Observers compared the moment to a predator in the wild that pauses when it hears its prey make the slightest sound, a primal calculation, weighing risk against opportunity. The creatures, or machines, or whatever they might be, seemed to reconsider, as if evaluating the intentions of the ones who had dared to speak first. And in that silence, fear mingled with awe. Humanity, for the first time, was no longer merely an observer of the unknown. We had reached out, and the unknown had responded in its own inscrutable way. Across laboratories and control centers, a strange tension has settled. Teams that once debated data in calm, scientific tones now whisper in low, urgent voices. Some feel relief, imagining that the stillness signals caution rather than hostility. Others feel dread, convinced that the pause may be a prelude to something far more calculated and deliberate. And the world beyond the labs feels it too. People staring at the night sky, wondering if the pause is a warning, or an invitation, or something we cannot yet conceive. The void, which has always seemed so vast and indifferent, has, for a single heartbeat, become conscious, and humanity has sensed it. This is Alex Mercer, reporting at a moment when the line between courage and folly blurs, when our voice has traveled across the cosmic dark and been met not with answer, but with consideration. For the first time, we know that the entities approaching Earth are not blind, not indifferent. They are listening, and we, for the first time, are fully aware that they may be deciding just how we should exist in the universe. This is Alex Mercer, and the world is witnessing phenomena so extraordinary, so wildly beyond our scientific expectations, that even the experts are struggling to put language to what they're seeing. In the hours following Earth's failed attempt at contact, the skies began to change. Not in the quiet, gradual way we associate with weather patterns, but suddenly, violently, as if the atmosphere itself were reacting to the presence of the alien signal. Tonight, the sky has become a vast and impossible canvas of lights. Auroras now ripple across regions where they have never appeared in all of recorded history, shimmering above deserts, unraveling across tropical coastlines, spiraling in haunting, serpentine patterns above open oceans. Colors that do not exist in any known spectrum flicker at the edges of perception. Hues that seem to shift depending on whether you blink or breathe or dare to look too closely. Scientists initially suspected a geomagnetic storm, perhaps a solar flare coinciding with the alien transmission. But that theory fell apart quickly. Solar activity is normal. Earth's magnetic field is stable. And yet, the ionosphere is singing, alive with charged particles that behave as if orchestrated by an unseen conductor. GPS systems have begun to fail in cascading pockets around the globe. Airplanes, suddenly blind to their own coordinates, are forced to reroute or ground entirely, leaving major airports packed with confused passengers who stare through terminal windows at skies filled with shimmering alien fire. Power grids hiccup, flicker, and surge. Some cities experience rolling blackouts. Not catastrophic, but unnervingly rhythmic, as though synced to the pulse of the signal, still threading itself through our air. Nature, too, senses the shift. Animals are fleeing, moving with an instinctual urgency that humans can only interpret as fear. Inland highways fill with deer fleeing coastal forests, Birds spiral chaotically through the sky before collapsing from exhaustion. Even household pets cling to their owners with a frantic desperation, whining at unseen forces pressing in on their senses. Marine life has begun migrating toward deeper waters, abandoning continental shelves in patterns that have no logical explanation. Every part of the natural world seems to understand, on some ancient level, that something is coming, something the Earth has not encountered before, something that bends the laws of nature simply by existing. The scientists I've spoken with tonight are split between awe and terror. Some see beauty in the sky's transformation, a cosmic display that suggests the universe is more alive and interconnected than we ever imagined. Others believe this is a reaction, a warning sign, a physical consequence of foreign technologies or energies penetrating the fragile membranes of our atmosphere. Whatever the cause, one truth feels undeniable. Earth is changing in response to the signal, adapting to a new presence that humankind is only beginning to comprehend. This is Alex Mercer, reporting as the world trembles under the weight of something vast, ancient, and entirely unfamiliar. The sky is no longer just the sky. It is a message, a mirror, a herald of what waits beyond our comprehension, drawing ever closer. This is Alex Mercer, and I am not sure any of us were prepared for how quickly the sky would change from strange to terrifying. In the wake of the atmospheric distortions, the auroras, the electromagnetic disruptions, the tremors in nature itself, we have now entered a new phase of this unfolding event. The unknown objects, once silent silhouettes drifting between planets, have breached Earth's atmosphere. They are here, visible, undeniable, and utterly unlike anything humanity has ever seen. Reports from around the world are pouring in faster than they can be verified, yet the descriptions echo one another with chilling consistency. Dark shapes, sleek, elongated, almost organic in outline, pierce the cloud cover one by one. They do not burn with re-entry heat. They do not streak across the sky in fiery arcs. Instead, they slip through the atmosphere as if it opens willingly for them, as if the air itself is rearranging to accommodate their descent. And they make no thunderous roar like our rockets. There is no explosion of sound. Instead, they emit a low, resonant hum that vibrates more in the chest than in the ears, a frequency that feels disturbingly familiar, the same pulse woven into the original interstellar signal. Eyewitnesses from major cities report enormous silhouettes hovering with perfect stability above urban centers. No thrusters, no wings, no discernible means of support. Just vast, unlit bodies suspended effortlessly, as if gravity has little meaning to them. Other craft have chosen the oceans, descending with the grace of falling leaves, vanishing beneath the waves without a splash, without disturbing the surface, as though they were simply returning to a home they had always known. Naval instruments detect them deep below, drifting through the water in absolute silence, their intentions unknowable. And the people, my God, the people have filled the streets. In every major city, crowds gather not in celebration, not in protest, but in raw, unfiltered awe coated in terror. Faces tilt upward, illuminated by the strange glow of auroral storms overhead. Parents clutch children tightly. Strangers cling to strangers. Some fall to their knees and pray. Others stand frozen, unable to move, their breath stolen by the enormity of what hangs above them. This moment, this sight, dark craft descending from a sky already reshaped by alien forces, strikes at something primitive within us, a fear written in our DNA long before the first humans stood upright. Scientists and military experts are scrambling, but no one can offer clarity. Are these craft scouts, messengers, instruments of war, survivors fleeing something worse? Or are they drawn here by the same warning we uncovered in the signal's hidden layer? The questions multiply, but the answers remain impossibly distant. The world holds its breath as the unknown hovers overhead, heavy and patient, as if waiting for us to understand something we have not yet learned to perceive. This is Alex Mercer, speaking in a moment when humanity stands beneath shadows cast by visitors from the stars. Shadows that stretch across oceans, across cities, across the boundaries of everything we once believed the universe to be. The sky has opened, and whatever has emerged from it is no longer a distant mystery. It is here. It is above us. And it is watching. This is Alex Mercer, and I'm speaking to you now during a moment that may well mark the end of human control over our own airwaves. Only minutes ago, something unprecedented unfolded across every major broadcast system on Earth. It began with the familiar tone of the emergency alert system, sharp, commanding, unmistakable. But within seconds, that familiar sound began to twist, as though some unseen hand reached through the circuitry and gripped it, bending its pitch and rhythm until it grew slow and misshapen. The tone did not fail. It did not cut out. It changed. Deliberately. Purposefully. The alert we created to warn ourselves was reshaped into something else, something alien. Across the country, and according to early reports, across the world, radio stations, television channels, even dormant emergency bands opened themselves without human command. Engineers tried desperately to override them, but nothing responded. The system was no longer ours. Then, through the static, something began to emerge. Not a message in any language we know, not a pattern we could decipher. It was a voice, or at least the closest approximation to one. Faint at first, barely brushing the edges of perception. But as the distortion stabilized, it resolved into a sound that felt impossibly close, as though it were speaking directly inside our skulls rather than through speakers. The resonance was unnatural, layered, vibrating, almost alive. Every frequency seemed to carry a different tone, a different emotional weight, like the overlapping whispers of countless unseen beings trying to shape themselves into a single sound. People everywhere froze. Not because they understood the message, but because something instinctual inside them recognized the intent. The voice did not speak words, it formed no sentences, and yet the meaning washed through the static, heavy and undeniable, as though carried on some primal wavelength written into the bones of every living thing on this planet. It felt like presence, like awareness pressing against our world. The sensation was overwhelming, part fear, part awe, part a strange and impossible recognition, as if humanity, for the first time, was hearing the universe breathe. Experts monitoring the event are shaken. Linguists describe the sound as proto-communication, something not meant to convey information, but identity. Communication without language, presence without form. They believe the intelligence behind the signal was not trying to speak to us as equals, but rather to announce itself. Not with grammar or intention, but with existence alone. A simple truth carried on frequencies older than our species, older than our planet. We are here. Across the globe, people are still trying to regain their composure. Some report feeling dizzy or disoriented. Others say they felt nothing at all. just a sudden, crushing awareness of being observed. Emergency broadcast systems have begun returning online, but technicians warn this may only be temporary. For the first time, an intelligence beyond our world has reached into our machinery, shaped our technology like clay, and spoken through it, not with words, but with presence. This is Alex Mercer, reporting as humanity confronts a voice that may not be a voice at all, a message that says nothing in any language we know, and yet tells us everything we feared to confirm. The unknown is no longer distant. It is no longer silent. It is here, woven into the very waves we use to speak to one another. And now, it is speaking back. This is Alex Mercer, and what I'm about to recount may be the single most synchronized moment in human history, a moment in which every boundary separating nations, languages, and people vanished, not through unity, but through collective fear. It began without warning. Screens in living rooms flickered. Street billboards glitched into patterns not designed by any corporation. Hospital monitors spasmed. Phones, whether powered on or off, lit up with a harsh, colorless pulse. At first, it resembled a global hardware failure, a cascading crash across the infrastructure of civilization. But within seconds, it became clear. This was no malfunction. This was a takeover. Every device, every speaker, every radio frequency, every last piece of technology capable of emitting sound or light began vibrating with a resonance that felt more biological than mechanical, as though the entire digital world had been hijacked by something with breath and intent. I watched as the studio around me shuddered, our monitors displaying symbols I couldn't recognize. Not written characters, but flowing shapes that twisted like strands of living shadow. The air felt heavy, charged, as though the atmosphere itself was preparing to deliver a verdict. Then, as if obeying a silent countdown, all devices, everywhere, stabilized at once. Every screen turned the same blinding white. Every speaker emitted the same low, thrumming hum. Every human being, no matter where they were or what they were doing, lifted their eyes or tilted their head in the same moment, sensing that something was about to reach out across the technological web we built and touch us directly. And then it came. Not a voice, not exactly. Not a language either. It was more like a concept forced into sound, a meaning that bypassed the ears entirely and landed somewhere deeper. Instinct, memory, something ancestral and unprotected. The phrase did not need to be translated. It arrived whole, imprinted, understood by every mind simultaneously. Children cried out. Grown adults dropped what they were holding. Entire cities fell silent in the same second as 3 words echoed through the human world. This world is observed. The message was not shouted. It was not whispered. It was delivered like a statement of fact, cold and indifferent, yet heavy enough to bend the air around it. It felt less like communication and more like evaluation, an assessment from something vast, something watching us not with curiosity, but with scrutiny. The words carried the weight of a cosmic survey, as though an intelligence older than our species had paused to issue a note in the margins of a report we were never meant to read. When the phrase faded, the screens dimmed, the vibrations died. One by one, devices returned to normal, or at least they pretended to. But the silence that followed was worse than the message itself. People everywhere were left trembling with the unmistakable sense that we had just been measured, judged, categorized. Not as threats, not as equals, but as a planet under observation, like an insect habitat someone had tapped on the glass of. This is Alex Mercer, and tonight, humanity faces the chilling truth that whatever watches us does not see us as conquerors of our world, or even as authors of our own fate. We have become the observed, and the observers have finally announced themselves. This is Alex Mercer, and as I speak these words, the world is split between the memory of the message and the nightmare that followed. For hours after the phrase, "this world is observed," imprinted itself onto humanity's collective consciousness, the planet seemed to hold its breath. There were no follow-up transmissions, no further signs from whatever intelligence had reached into our machines. A global paralysis took hold, an instinctual, animal silence before a storm. Scientists clung to their instruments, waiting for anything they could quantify. Civilians gathered in hurried clusters, eyes fixed on the sky as though expecting it to peel open at any moment. And then, as day stretched into a brittle twilight, something shifted. The clouds, thick, low, and unnaturally uniform, began to ripple like disturbed water. The atmosphere itself seemed to tense, vibrating with a rising frequency that pressed against bones and teeth. Birds fell from their perches. Dogs began to howl. Streetlights flickered as though trying to blink themselves awake. Whatever had been watching was beginning to move. The first fracture appeared without sound, a thin white line slicing across the evening sky like a crack in glass. People stopped mid-sentence, mid-step, mid-breath, staring upward as the fissure widened, branching into jagged patterns that resembled lightning frozen in place. The clouds peeled apart with surgical precision, revealing not the calm blue above, but a roiling darkness, an abyssal void threaded with faint geometric shapes, pulsing in time with the original cosmic signal. Something enormous shifted behind that veil, a silhouette so vast it eclipsed portions of the horizon. Before anyone could process what they were seeing, the fractures multiplied. Dozens, hundreds. The sky no longer looked broken. It looked actively dismantled. Then the machines descended. They did not fall like meteors or streak like rockets. They unfolded, slipping through the fractures as if stepping from one dimension into another. Their shapes were impossible to categorize. Too angular to be organic, too fluid to be manufactured. They drifted downward with predatory grace, each one humming with the same pulse that had hijacked Earth's communications. The hum grew louder, resonating through buildings, rattling windows, shaking dust from ceilings. Phones died. Radios hissed with a final burst of static. Emergency networks collapsed in unison, not overwhelmed, but overwritten. Whatever these machines were, they didn't merely interfere with our technology, they dominated it. Panic erupted. Cars stalled on highways. Aircraft diverted blindly through failing GPS. Crowds surged into streets, desperate for shelter, yet unsure where safety could exist under a sky that seemed to be cracking open like an egg. In major cities, the descending craft paused mid-air, scanning, motionless, silent, cold. Some emitted beams of shifting light that swept across skyscrapers like searchlights searching not for movement, but for meaning. Others hovered low over oceans, sending ripples across the water as though listening. Everywhere, the machines behaved like creatures with purpose, not chaotic invaders, but methodical entities executing a plan older than humanity itself. When the first one touched the ground, the earth trembled, not with impact, but with recognition, like two vast systems sinking after ages apart. The machine stood motionless for several seconds, towering over a panicked crowd. Its surface changed, rippling like liquid metal, and then, with a sound like an exhale, the world's remaining communications blinked out entirely. No phones, no radios, no satellite feeds. Humanity was not just cut off from one another. We were made deaf, mute, blind to the outside world in a single chilling instant. This is Alex Mercer, broadcasting through what may be the last surviving analog channel we have, and I will not pretend optimism. The sky above us is no longer a sky. It is a doorway. The machines that step through it are not exploring. They are arriving. And humanity, stripped of its voice and swallowed by silence, stands on the threshold of something we are not prepared to name. This is not first contact anymore. This is the beginning.